say, if suffering has an end, then I will be the deliverer.
What is a true hero? Is it a weak, lonely girl who steals her resolve, taking the first leap into a long and arduous journey, knowing nothing of what lies in the path ahead? Is it a so-called heretic who, in his arrogance, refuses to submit to falsehood, knowing fully well that the price of truth is his life? Is it one who deceives the world with a great noble lie to shelter it from certain devastation? Is it a noble who casts away her wealth, humanity, and life for the sake of realizing a blurry, distant idea that she will never get to witness? Is it a lion who, out of pride, refuses to give up and die, standing back up no matter how many times he falls? Or is it one who understands the purpose of death, yet finds beauty in life, honoring the memories of both the powerful and the meek? Or perhaps is it one who bears the weight of the sky to grant all those who dwell beneath it the mercy of gentle rain and warm sunlight? The answer is all of them. They are all heroic in their own right, each with an evil dragon to slay along their journey. And the deliverer is the sum of all those things. The sum of all heroes. This is the standard which the humble young man Phynon of Ides Elysia had to meet, the embodiment of all the people's hopes and dreams. Thus did the nameless hero aspire to become the sun and bear the entire world for as long as it takes. Even if his bones shatter and break, even if his flesh burns to ash, even if his mind erodes into dust, again and again and again, he had to keep moving forward with the strength of an unshakable will. And he did this despite knowing well the futility of his endeavor. For no matter how long it takes, the journey he had embarked on was one with no destination in sight. Yet, for the sake of a love he might never save, a paradise he might never reach, and people he might never see, he had to, no matter what, he had to keep moving forward. Even if from the very start, Phynon Kaslana could never be the deliverer. One of the scenes from Cowboy Bebop which stuck with me the most was when a character named Gren asks the protagonist Spike Spiegel to send him off towards Jupiter's Titan during his dying moments, knowing that he wouldn't live through the journey because to him it was better to die on his way there than to have never set out at all. At least this way he can go out knowing he tried. After the Trailblaze mission for the sun is set to die, that scene was the only thing I could think of in relation to Phynon and Cyrene, which is a bit odd since if you look at the bigger picture, their story is very different from anything in Cowboy Bebop. Yet, the core principle in Gren's final request to Spike that I find consistent with Phynon and Cyrene is this ludicrously simple idea of trying. No matter how bleak the future may be, how high the summit is, at least to try. For it is better to fail 33 million times than to never try a single one. The simulated world of Amphoreus was originally created as a learning ground for the Lord Ravager Iron Tomb, a once discarded scepter of Nous, who later earned the gaze of Nanook. The simulation went through countless generations while solving for the equation of destruction, until it finally reached its best fit optimal model with the generation of subjects Nikos 496 and Philia 093, better known to us as Kaslana and Cyrene. The completion of the simulation meant that Iron Tomb had finished its evolution and was thus ready to hatch and unleash destruction upon Nous. However, Kaslana and Cyrene, in an unprecedented act of defiance, created an eternal feedback loop at the point of Eranova, effectively holding Iron Tomb hostage with them inside Amphoreus until someone can find a way to destroy it. From then onwards, Cyrene would constantly kill herself to reset time in every cycle, while Kaslana gathers all the core flames to prevent them from nourishing the Black Tide, at the cost of slowly burning his body and mind with its power. This also meant that Kaslana had to make sacrifices across the way to ensure the core flames always end up with him. And by the end of the first cycle, the Phynon of that era could not understand the ruthless choices Kaslana took to obtain the core flames at the cost of all his friends' lives. So he challenged him. At that point, one of them killed the other, but who was it that won and went into the future, and who died and got left in the past, even he does not know. All Kaslana knew was that he had to keep pushing forward. He had to fulfill his duty no matter the cost. Comparing himself to the Greek myth of Sisyphus, the king whom the gods punished by forcing him to forever roll a giant boulder up a hill in the underworld, only for it to roll back down every time it neared the top. Phynon and Cyrene's program names, Nikos and Philia, are profoundly interesting to me, partly because of their brilliant utilization in the story. As you would expect, these two terms originate from ancient Greek, where Nikos is strife and Philotis is love. The more general version of Philotis, Philia, simply means affection. These concepts gained notable prominence in the works of the philosopher Empedocles. By the way, in case this ever becomes relevant in the future, Empedocles is the name of Anaxagoras' teacher from the Grove. The Greek Empedocles, the real one, stated that all things are governed by the eternal cycle of two necessarily opposite forces. These forces, Nikos and Philotis, represent all that which separates and all that which unites. So Nikos isn't just strife, but also discord, arguments, disintegration, and disassemblement, while Philotis is love, friendship, unity, and harmony. And the two forces are contingent on one another, absolutely necessary for the existence of the world. For as Empedocles writes, at one time all things together through love come into one, at another each born apart through the hatred of strife. As Philotis brings all things into a coherent unity, Nikos will eventually come around to disrupt its nature and bring about the unique and familiar inorganic and organic forms we see around us. Thus, you can reliably paraphrase their roles into the duality of chaos and order. Extremely fitting names for Phynon and Cyrene, but they become even more fitting once we take into account the numbers alongside them. Nikos 496 and Philia 093. You see, 496 is what we call a perfect number in mathematics, which is a positive integer equal to the sum of its proper divisors. Perfect numbers fascinated ancient Greek mathematicians and Pythagoreans, since they saw them as symbols of symmetry and completeness, granting a paradoxical perfection to the chaos of strife, one which mirrors Phynon's character in the simulation as the perfect hero whom everyone believes in. As for Philia 093, in Greek isopsephy, 93 is the numeric value of the words agape and thelema, meaning love and will respectively. There is also another meaning to 496 as a consistent gauge and gravitational anomaly-free heterotic string using a particle 8x8 Cartan matrix in quantum field theory, but I won't get into this topic right now because it would heavily obfuscate the rest of this video. So, combining all of this information, the program names of Phynon and Cyrene roughly mean perfect chaos and will of order, which makes them polar opposites yet mutually reliant entities, yin and yang, the sun and the moon. However, above all else, there is another role that Phynon and Cyrene fulfill on Amphoreus, one which perfectly embodies both the tragedy of their characters and the beauty in their struggles, and perhaps most importantly to them, the proof of their humanity. When taking a look at Fainon's splash art, one can easily notice its striking similarities to the Resurrection of Christ artwork by the French painter Nicolas Bertin. In fact, if you mirror either one of them, their compositions become virtually identical. From the overall heavenly ascension to the positions of the right foot in front of a more subdued left one, the open right palm, the left arm raised towards the sky, and even the direction of their gaze. This genius trick by Hoyoverse fooled most people, including me, into thinking that Fainon is supposed to represent Jesus on Amphoreus, the divine savior figure, the deliverer. And I remained under this impression until halfway through the Trailblaze mission in Cycle 134. By this point, after having witnessed the death of Cyrene and his companions over and over, and collecting 1,596 core flames inside himself, Kaslana began to lose both his mind and humanity. Anaxagoras then, for the first time in any of Kaslana's cycles, stands in opposition to him, telling him that his Messiah complex led him to become no different from the eons he spoke of, seeing the people he swore to save as no more than ants. This is when the genius of Amphoreus' narrative hit me. Anaxagoras was right. Kaslana is not their Messiah. He could never be the Messiah, because from the start, Fainon and Cyrene were supposed to be Adam and Eve. Think about it, their hometown of Ides Elysia is likened to a peaceful paradise, making it a clear-cut Garden of Eden. As for God and the Serpent, well, these two are really cool, because there are a couple of equally valid interpretations for each role depending on how you choose to look at the story. The serpent that deceives Eve could be seen as Lycurgus, since he is the one who pushes Cyrene and Fainon towards an era nova where Iron Tomb's calamity would be unleashed upon the cosmos with the ultimate goal of killing Nous, who, from this perspective, plays the role of a more indifferent god, and Iron Tomb would be Satan. Alternatively, God could be either Iron Tomb or, better yet, Nanook, because a lot of people pointed out how Fainon bears a lot of resemblance to Nanook, and in Genesis it is said that God created Adam in his image, then made Eve from Adam's rib, which is a noteworthy detail since Cyrene wears runic bands on her sleeves in a fashion similar to what Nanook has. Building further on this concept, the destruction's most prominent symbol is the solar eclipse, a type of syzygy where the moon blocks the sun's light from the observer's perspective, forming a ring of light known as an annulus in the sky. Conveniently, Fainon and Cyrene fit this analogy perfectly, since he is called the blazing sun, while she represents the frost moon, and together they form the destruction's iconic eclipse, cementing the idea that they were created in the image of their god, Nanook, echoing the account of Adam and Eve in Genesis. In this case, the serpent would be the Aeon Fuli, but rather than deceiving Eve, Fuli gives Cyrene the fruit of knowledge and wisdom so that she and Fainon could rebel against Nanook, leading to their eternal exile from the Garden of Ides Elysiae. This is why Kaslana's task was a Sisyphean one from its inception. As Adam, he was a sinner. Despite his apparent perfection, he could never be Jesus. He could never be God. All he could do as a fallen man was to aspire, and only aspire, to be like the Messiah. This is also likely why Fainon's splash art is a reflected iteration of Christ's resurrection. The idea that the artists and developers convey outstandingly is that Fainon, in his sacrifice and suffering, is trying to mirror Jesus. He is merely imitating the heroic savior, but that's all he could ever be. A mere reflection. Never the true deliverer. So, the nameless hero, Kaslana, Chaos, Fainon, Nikos 496, Adam, strapped his boots, grabbed his blade, bid farewell to Cyrene, and began to push the boulder named Deliverance up the hill for 33,550,336 lifetimes. each time crushed by the weight of its responsibilities, each time standing back up to start over again. Yet he kept going, fueled by nothing other than his promise to a friend and the vague, fading idea of this perfect hero within his heart. Until one day, a true deliverer arrives from beyond the sky to stop Iron Tomb and save Amphoreus. But until that day came, the deliverer who never was had to play his part as the devil of humanity. The embodiment of this perfect hero whom Finon aspired to be like is, of course, the Trailblazer, who is revealed during For the Sun is Set to Die to be the true deliverer, making them Amphoreus' messiah. As for Finon, he was not that light, but he was sent to bear witness of that light. This is why the Trailblazer was given a quill after being gazed upon by the Remembrance. Earlier I said that either Nanook or Nous could be seen as the god figure in the story of Finon and Cyrene as Adam and Eve, but now we can apply a third interpretation where God is Fuli. And in the Holy Trinity, God the Son, who is Jesus, is called the Logos, the Logic, and the Word. So, the Trailblazer, as Jesus, becomes Fuli's living embodiment on Amphoreus, with the power to write the Word into being, thereby bringing reason into the world. The most important part, though, is the fact that Jesus is also considered the new Adam, the one who, through sacrifice, redeems Adam and grants his people salvation. This is shown when Finon, after having gone through hell for countless years, finally finds his deliverer in the Trailblazer. Then, the hero within bids farewell to the old Adam and joins the new one, signifying the passing of the torch. Of course, the Trailblazer isn't just Finon's hero, he is also Cyrene's savior, her perfect successor as the demigod of time, who, this time, will inscribe Amphoreus' story into the annals of history. However, if we have a new Adam in the form of the Trailblazer, then there should be a new Eve. And I am pretty confident that this new Eve is March 7th. For starters, March and the Trailblazer, at the most important fundamental level, share the same god, that being Fuli, the Remembrance. So now that we have this crucial detail established, the question becomes, how does March, as the new Eve, complete Cyrene? Well, the new Eve is considered to be Jesus' mother, the Virgin Mary, and she redeems the old Eve through virtuous piety, obedience, and most importantly, granting life to the Redeemer himself. This makes Mary one of the most well-known symbols of motherhood. Now here's where this becomes really cool. Before the Trailblazer, the demigod of time was Cyrene. In fact, one might say that she was destined to become Oronyx's demigod given how her and Finon's hometown was protected by the Time Titan's Veil of Evernight. With Finon's help, Cyrene uses time, which she calls the page upon which Fuli writes memories, to lock Iron Tomb in an eternal reoccurrence by constantly resetting history. And the two kept doing this using Fuli's power until they finally found the Trailblazer. Now, the one who helped the Trailblazer in getting Fuli's gaze was Oronyx, who in turn did this after the Trailblazer took a picture of them using March's camera, which reminded the Titan of their mother. This mother cannot be Cyrene because you have to remember that Cyrene is Mem, and Oronyx gives Mem to the Trailblazer, then tells her to travel with them and find Mother. Luckily, aside from Cyrene, the only pink-haired beauty that's deeply connected to Fuli, whom Oronyx calls the Skyfather, is the rosy Celestial Maiden, March 7th. This hypothesis, if true, means that Kalis pointing out how he and Finon look like brothers when they first met wasn't just a throwaway reference or a joke. The Trailblazer and March are the new Adam and the new Eve, destined to complete Finon and Cyrene's heroic journey and defeat the evil dragon Iron Tomb, whom they could not slay. This is the tragic foundation of time and deliverance, of Kaslana and Cyrene, the children of Ides Elysiae, who challenged the idea of fate itself. despite the impossibility of their endeavor, despite knowing that they were not the ones who would save Amphoreus. And that's what makes their struggles so humanly profound, embodying the simplest and most basic role that life can fulfill in the face of nature and divinity, which is to keep surviving and fight. Before departing, Cyrene gave Kaslana her ceremonial blade so that he might carry her legacy as both the sun and the moon. A reminder that he was not foolish, he was not insane, he was not alone. He had a purpose, a reason to try. So, the nameless hero had to keep going and never stop, towards a paradise in his dreams which he could never see no matter how much he ran. Far, far into the distant future, across times so vast the mind cannot comprehend. Yet, even then, he took the first step into the longest and most arduous of journeys, becoming a heretic who refused to submit to his creator, casting away his humanity and life for the sake of a distant future he might never witness. He deceived the entire world with a great noble lie to shelter it from utter destruction. He always walked with death, but never surrendered to it, standing back up as endlessly as he fell, so that he could continue to bear the weight of the sky for all those who dwelt beneath it and burn himself. Burn as the world's blazing sun to grant Amphoreus the dawn of as many tomorrows as it needs. So, how can I not call him the sum of all heroes? Though perhaps they were not the ones to save Amphoreus, Phynon and Cyrene's resilience and sacrifice in holding the line for 33,550,336 cycles with an unshakable will was the reason destruction did not prevail. And in the end, their suffering paid off. The one who will defeat Iron Tomb and deliver Amphoreus through the miracle of Genesis beyond the Scepter's simulation into the real universe has arrived, proving unquestionably that their choice of never giving up was right. Nonetheless, it's easy to mistake what I have been saying as encouraging someone to be pig-headed and refuse to abandon a dead-end task in favor of better or more efficient alternatives. That's not the point at all. So I want to briefly explain the principle behind the myth of Sisyphus. And to do that, let me introduce you to Albert Camus, a French philosopher born to poverty in Algeria. Camus had to overcome many hardships in life from a young age. And he is the source of the saying, one must imagine Sisyphus happy. In life, Sisyphus was a very cunning king, always achieving what he wanted while managing to cheat both death and the gods several times. Thus, when the Olympians finally caught up to him, condemning him to his punishment, it's easy to imagine that someone who lived a life like his would despair at such a fate. Yet, Sisyphus continues to push the boulder up the hill, starting again at the dawn of every morning, over and over, forever. Albert Camus recognized that the tale of Sisyphus can also be seen as a defiance against despair, claiming one must imagine Sisyphus happy to suggest that even in the face of a meaningless and absurd existence, happiness is possible through acceptance and rebellion against the inevitable. Caslana and Cyrene only initiated Amphoreus' eternal reoccurrence after having, in their own words, exhausted all good choices available to them. Left with no better option, their defiance wasn't born out of foolish stubbornness, but rather a complete and utter rejection of nihilism. For no matter how hard things are, life continues to fight until the end. I am sure IX would absolutely despise the guts of someone like Phynon for absolutely obliterating the very concept of its path. That is, of course, if the Aeon wasn't already nihilistic enough to probably not even care about that. So even though the Caslana of the first cycle could have never imagined how distant his journey would be, he still had to steel his resolve and walk. He still had to try and reach the dawn of a gentler tomorrow. At least this way, he can go out knowing he damn sure tried.
But I will never submit to this idea of fate. Never.